G'day fans and welcome to another exciting episode of Talk Nerdy. The first thing that you will notice is that Aaron over there isn't Aaron. I got a replacement dude. Some random puppy has decided to pop his nose in and be a part of the show. And of course, if you don't know who it is, it's Jeffro. You going, old son?
I am an AI simulator. I am not the real Jeff, bro.
Oh,
I will be participating.
What's the deal with that? What's the deal with that? So Jeffro has joined me. Aaron called in sick a couple of hours, like an hour ago, and I thought, who can take over from the Aaron who is cool enough to be the replacement the new A, and of course it can't be me. So as it turned out, Jeffro said, mate, he'll pop his beak in and say hello and check out the show. And here you go, old son. I haven't had you online on a video show for a couple of years. So how you keeping?
I'm doing very well, actually. The topics today were really good, so I'm looking forward to discussing all about auctions I can't afford to bid in.
I like this one from Adzi. That was loud. Well, guess what? It's only going to get louder because we are just so excited to be here. It is cold. It is wet. It is miserable. But like they say in cabaret, leave your troubles outside. Life is disappointing. Forget it. In here, life is beautiful. The Jeffros are beautiful. Even the collectibles are beautiful. So how about that? So everybody's saying g'day, g'day, g'day. It is all good stuff. So if the first thing that now we have a program for the show, but you know what it is, it's a bit of laugh, bit of shits and giggles, and we're going to have a bit of a chat about some sci-fi stuff. And my mate Jeffro, who's joined me, as I said, at very, very last minute, so I do appreciate that. We're going to be chatting about some very, very cool things, Mr. Jeffro. What do you reckon?
I reckon we're going to be going real nerd, full on 100%, all out sort of the nerdy goodness.
Tell you what, nerd full out 100%. I'm going full fans. I'm going full nerd. How good is that?
We're going 88 miles an hour, nerd.
Exactly right. Oh my God, even Rusky babes. What the hell? Aaron is a Jeffro change. Well, there you go. As the old T-shirt says, improve your image, be seen with me, and that's exactly what it is all about. Anyway, we do actually have a show to cover off. Now, to be fair, now Jeffro is only joining us for the first half, so we're doing this whole thing a bit backwards. So based on the promo, we're going to be discussing The Handmaid's Tale and then doing the collectibles section last. We're now going to reverse it and do the auction part first, if that makes sense. And Jeffro will depart once we get to the second half of the show, which is very, very cool. First thing I wanted to chuck in there, I've got no news. Bugger the news out. No one's interested in news. What? He was a trans. He doesn't know if he's Aaron or Jeffro at the best of times. Now, this one, Jeffro.
Yeah, I'm Aaron.
You are. I just want to chuck this one in. A couple of weeks ago, the guy, it was actually about 3 or 4 weeks back, the guy who made Super Size Me, the documentary, his name was what, Jeffro?
Morgan Spurlock. I knew you know, because Morgan Spurlock.
Very good, with the blah, blah, blahs at the end. I found out when I did some reading about that dude, he actually made a documentary in 2010, actually called Comic-Con, Episode 4 of The Fans' Hope. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. He made a documentary about Comic-Con in America, of course. And he actually made a point of following all these people around at Comic-Con to see what their stories would be. So you had people who were into costuming, people who were trying to sell comic books, one guy who ran a comic book store trying to sell something really expensive. And I found out the whole documentary is on YouTube. It's under Kevin Smith's channel. Have you seen it at all, or did you know about it?
Have I seen it? I've actually got the special edition DVD that came with 2 action figures. So have I seen it? Yes, I do. It's proud in my bookshelf. Yeah.
I didn't even know. What were the action figures of?
You've got Harry Knowles, who runs the Ain't It Cool News website. And the other one is Stan Lee.
Oh, well, there you go. Actually, William Mercedes also owns that on DVD. And I like this one. Yeah, Aaron's body was wearing thin. I didn't even know. I had no idea until I read. Oh, that's interesting. So, for yourself, did you find it to be a really interesting sort of story? Because there's something in particular I wanted to bring up about it.
Oh, absolutely. Because, I mean, at that stage, I really didn't know too much about Comic-Cons, except for what I may have seen, you know, sort of with pictures posted up. And mostly it was like all about the costumes. So you didn't really get to see too much about the rest of the thing. And I found it very fascinating. I mean, he's one of my favorite directors. So I've seen everything that he's made. And if you are interested in that, he actually wrote a book that was based on Comic Con as well. So if you want to do an eBay search, you can find that book as well.
And for those who are wondering, it's not a low budget piece of cheap rubbish. It's got, your Stan Lees of the world and Kevin Smiths and all sorts of really important movers and shakers in the biz who talk. But what I found interesting in the start of the show is how they're discussing how Comic Con has really got nothing to do with comics. And the reason why I brought that up, and the reason why I'm bringing it up now, is because I was at Oz Comic Con a couple of weeks ago, and I actually heard someone else mention the same thing, saying that how what started off as being a comic convention in the early 1970s in America, comics themselves are now being pushed aside, even though the thing is called Comic Con. And I thought that is interesting. Now, that's obviously back in 2010. It's probably gotten worse since then. But I thought it was an interesting scenario how something can start with a core idea, but as pop culture it sort of changes, movies, TV shows, because obviously in the early 1970s it wasn't anywhere near as big as what it became decades later, and of course the costuming, as you said. How do you find the scenario being that you've got an event called Comic Con, but comics themselves are almost like not a part of it any longer?
I mean, I absolutely agree, and it's like media fandom eventually wins out. Like we had a discussion many years ago, back in the the 70s and 80s. Sort of literary fandom was the thing, and there was no real media fandom. But sure as heck, media fandom actually took over, and then sort of literary fandom sort of really fell by the wayside. So it's almost, you could call it comical con, because there's no comics per se except for the Marvel Disney heroes. I mean, that's as comic-y as it gets.
So you do wonder if some point in America in particular, someone says, let's change the name, because even though it's synonymous with this history, I wonder if somebody's going to say, let's just change it to something else because comics aren't the thing anymore. Won't that just upset the purists absolutely no end? In any event, the documentary's out there. It is on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing if you want, so you don't have to buy the box set with the action figures and whatever else. But I really liked it. I thought it was actually quite interesting, and an interesting story as well, especially once you follow where all those people in the show ended up. It's a comic con, indeed it is. What have we got? If you look at the early pictures and videos of OCC from the 70s, it's dudes like Forrest Axelman and Stan Lee and chicks dressed as Vampirella. Yeah. Well, the thing has moved on a fair way, and of course now costuming is almost their bee's knees. That aside, alongside actors and celebrities. So Christy said, if you dress as a comic character, very few know about it. Movies are more recognizable. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, and anime, of course, is gigantic now. So there you go. Anyway, whatever. Check it out. Have a good look. Now, the big talking point for tonight, as I said, we've got two main topics, and this is one we're going to bring up first. Aaron, when he was around there, he's put all these slides together. Bless his nerdy cotton socks, but he's not here with us tonight. Put all these slides together because we found an auction catalog called Julian's, and they're auctioning off, and it's current. It's happening right now. All these pop culture things. And he sent me through the link, and we had a look. And I was like, oh, my God, it's absolutely mind-blowing stuff. Now, Jeffro hasn't seen any of this stuff at all, so and I'm going to have to use the magnifying glass of truth to see some of it because the images are pretty small. But we're going to have a bit of a sticky beak. What's going on under the hammer at Julian's online auction house? Hollywood legends, danger, disaster, and disco. I don't know how disco fits in there unless it's Star Trek Discovery. And just off the top of your noggin there, Mr. Jeffro, you're probably wondering what that thing is right there. What do you reckon, without having to look at it, because I know you won't be able to read it, what do you reckon that thing is?
I think that's a unicorn from the Magical Beasts. I have no idea.
I was thinking, where are you going with that? Well, using the magnifying glass of truth, it's actually Zack Snyder's Justice League paint test hot dog prop. What the hell, man? Now, you might be saying, how much does a paint test hot dog prop cost? Well, it's currently estimated, and this is American dollars, $100 to $200. What do you reckon of that, dude?
I think you'll find whenever you look at those auction catalogs, most of the prices are undervalued because they want people to look at the catalogs and go, oh, I could reasonably afford that. But when it comes to the actual auction itself, prices shoot up. So I never really find them at true value. Or no, in that case, that may be worth $100. I don't know.
Well, indeed. I like this one from Madsy. Can we pick on Docky who while Aaron is away? Indeedy doody diddy. I'm just looking at this, by the way. This thing just here, this top, right? You go, okay, that's just a jacket of some sort. If you look at it now, no one can read this because the text is so small. It's actually a Marlon Brando personally owned and worn caftan. Oh, how about that, mate? Don't worry about trying to spend the money on that particular item. Just make them an offer they can't refuse. So, what do you reckon there, Jeffro?
One of the things about Julians is they get estates or people that are wanting to sort of clear off stuff before they die. So you quite often see Kenny Rogers or Dolly Parton or any sort of star will just say, "Here's my whole sort of house." Sell it en masse, and that's what they do. They really do. So that's a particular thing of Julian's to do that.
And how much did it go for? It went for a whopping. Oh my goodness gracious me! All right, so we're going to move through some of them and have a bit of a sticky beak. Good old Coneheads has made an appearance. Now the thing I found funny is that typically prosthetics don't have a very long lifespan, and as you can see there are Coneheads there. They're just called prehistoric prosthetic mask props A, B, and whatever else. And has the bottom left, Dan Aykroyd, Belder, Clawhorn, head appliance, whatever. I'm surprised these things are still existing there, Mr. Mr. Aaron, Mr. Jeffro. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of these things where it's been like aliens made from like 80s movies or 70s movies. And they must have a way of being able to sort of keep these things alive and preserve them. I know there's a lot of professional restorers, and they must have some sort of way of making sure it doesn't dry out. So maybe it's like a really good bottle of wine. You've got to have it hermetically sealed in a case or something. I don't know, but it's not unknown for props of that kind of vintage to in latex and all that to be around and sold.
I think the hard part would be that unless you're a really diehard Coneheads fan, to buy one of those heads and then show it to your friends and say, "I spent hundreds of bucks on this," they wouldn't have a damn clue as to what it was or why. Having said that, the prices are pretty cheap based on what we're seeing here. So, yeah, I don't know. So each to their own. They reckon a couple of $100 each. Honestly, now we're all over the place regarding these pictures. The next one up, of course, is the TV series The Munsters. A whole lot of cool stuff regarding the Munsters stuff. The bottom left is the Yvonne De Carlo 1964 Munsters-related design cocktail dress, which is kind of cool. A couple of bids on that already, funnily enough. What do you reckon about some of the Munster stuff there, Mr. Jeffrey? Do you reckon that'd work for you?
Well, I think the Munsters at least have the ability to be able to say they're still relevant and iconic, because even now they're still talking about remaking the Munsters. I know it's hard to believe. There's been about 3 or 4 different remakes, including a movie a couple of years ago. So there is that interest there in the Munsters, unlike some other 60s television shows that have dropped by the wayside. So it might do reasonably well, particularly with the horror buffs.
This item right here, right, that one that I'm circling, I was looking at that thinking, what is that? And believe it or not, fans, it's a Yvonne De Carlo 1950s era dental bridge. Hey, there you go. Sink your fangs into that also. What do you reckon?
Ah, well done. Yes, yeah. I mean, there is some stuff that you think, well, unless you want to get Yvonne De Carlo's DNA off the saliva off that thing, it's not really a big seller. But I don't know. There's some people that might have a kink for that kind of thing, dentistry stuff.
Maybe at the top now, way up here in the top right-hand corner, I was looking at these pictures and I thought, what would they be? They are Yvonne De Carlo 2001 signed checks. Who the hell would be selling those? Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yes, this is just another example where obviously Yvonne De Carlo has collected all these things, the memorabilia that she has over the years. And as said, the state has just suddenly said, well, okay, let's get rid of them and make some cash. But there's a lot of that kind of stuff, checks and all that, because checks are really good for signatures. And if people want a signature of someone that's passed away, it's a nice little way of doing it rather than a photo.
And if you hold one in each hand, you can guarantee that there'll be checks and balances. What happens with props? Rubber perishes over time, but it depends on what type of rubber and the additives in it. And I totally agree with you. Yeah, certain latexes will deteriorate faster than others. Someone rated the bin at the bank. Exactly right. This is a bit more closer to home. So on the top left, you got the 2010. The year we made contact in suit. A couple of $1,000 there. And of course, on the right-hand side, it's E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Universal Studios Japan E.T. Adventure Animatronics. So it's not the original E.T., but it's probably cast from an E.T. mold. And at the bottom, the bike that Elliot used to ride, it's the promotional one in the magazine. And of course, we've seen a picture of that bike because it's a Kiwahara, that's the brand. And so that's the actual bike they used in the photograph. I thought, look at that, $12,500, Mr. Jeffro. What do you reckon?
Yeah, the bike, I'm not too sure about that because I mean it's a known bike brand, and does it actually say that it was actually used in the movie, or is it used on the?
It's promotional, right? E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Elliot 1981 Kiwahara BMX bike made for production and used in promotional advertisement with magazines. So if you ever see the advertisement, you can look it up on YouTube online. You can find pictures of it. That's the bike they used. In fact, I think that's the actual angle for it too. So it's not the one used in the show. So there you go.
I think they probably overvalued that one because it is essentially it's what they call in the industry a stunt bike. It's not the hero bike; it's the stunt one. And that ET, I mean, that was on a ride in Japan, and I guess the only way you can really sort of see that is there's like a brief YouTube video where someone's had a handheld camera and you see it, and it's like sitting as one of the things. So it's not the real thing. So it is really clutching at straws to say this is a prop that I would want because it's just an amusement park prop, which doesn't have the same kind of cachet.
Yep, no, fair enough. Russell's asked how much would Nicole's BMX banded bike go for? That's a very good one actually because she's a bit of a superstar now. So get her to sign that and go, well, how good is that? Oh, that's a very, very cool. So hang on, what? He has some used and slightly abused crap in your house. It doesn't necessarily work the same way there, Mr. Colin. This stuff does have to have some intrinsic value. And with that in mind, it's the old Batty Man stuff there, Mr. Jeffro. We've got batarangs and cows and penguins and doodads. And that thing at the bottom, by the way, is not a Yoda head. I just realized that myself. It's a Jim Carrey, Edward Nigma Riddler Bat Bomb prototype. So there you go. What do you reckon?
Well, I do know that the Batman 89 stuff has been hitting some really high prices in some of the earlier auctions. And I wouldn't be surprised if the trend continues. The average rule is it tends to be that people that are looking at stuff now are best looking at stuff that's from the 80s because they're of a generation that they grew up on that when they were little kids and now have the income to be able to afford the things that they watched and saw as a kid. So this 89 stuff is right in the in that area for the collectors to want to get.
So the cowl just here, right in the middle actually, is a Val Kilmer one. That's obviously Batman Forever. Bruce Wayne prototype. So it's a prototype cowl, which means it wasn't necessarily screen used. And they've actually estimated 10 to 20 grand for that. So bloody hell. Jeffro, what do you reckon this thing is on the top right-hand corner that I'm circling? What do you reckon that is?
I was looking at that and I was just trying to figure that one out. And it almost looks like a bad Muppet.
Well, believe it or not, right? From Batman and Robin, so that alone makes it pretty terrible. But it's Arnold Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze facial application. I was like, oh dear, that one will have to stay in the cooler. What do you reckon there, Jeffro?
It's one of these things where auctions for props are really getting good prices these days, and stuff is coming out of the woodwork. And I mean, this is like a pretty random item, but someone's thought, well, hey, this stuff's going for high prices. Let's dig it out of the closet and put it up for auction. So we are getting a lot of tat as well as some good stuff.
Yep. I like it. Spankin has said he wants all of it, which I kind of get, which is probably not going to get any better when this pops up. So you got an Imperious Leader ensemble on the left-hand side. Hey, mate, they reckon $3 to $5 grand for that. The RoboCop on the top right is from RoboCop 3, right? So in case you didn't know, which is very cool. They reckon that one's going to go for $5,000. You got a bit of xenomorph production art from Geiger. That's 30 to 50 grand there, Mr. Jeffro. How good is that?
Yeah. It's that Geiger name. Anything that's got his name on it is gold. I mean, he has his legions of fans. So I don't know. It does seem quite high, but I mean, if it's original artwork, sort of, it could go crazy.
Yeah, and it's from the first movie as well, which has probably got something else to do with it. The problem with foam latex is they will deteriorate over time. We discussed that earlier. You're obviously joined in late, Mr. Spankin, so you're going to lose money on it. You probably will, unless you know how to preserve it. Now, without actually looking at the text, have a guess as to what the item on the right-hand side is there, Mr. Jeffro.
Yeah, it's like smart casual wear.
So, for those who can or can't read it, it's a Rick Deckard. Oh, it's from 2049. I thought it was the actual Blade Runner from 82. So, it's probably not worth as much. So, 2,000 to 3,000.
It's a shirt from the future. It's from 2049. Gee, I wish we were snappier dressed than that.
I tell you what, you're not wrong. The red jacket in the middle is actually a crew jacket from it looks like 2049. Actually, look like I don't know which movie it is. That's a couple of $1,000 there, and of course the blueprints. If you want to build yourself your own spinner, there's so it's cheap, $500 for that. So what do you reckon? The shirt looks pretty ordinary.
The stuff from Blade Runner is really hard to come by. In fact, they had an almost complete Rick Deckard ensemble that was auctioned, I think, about 6 months ago, and the bidding was hot. So, because it's so hard to see stuff from Blade Runner, there's just so little around that, it's like when it does, it goes nuts. So, obviously, if you want a consolation prize, 2049 might be it.
I was thinking the same question. What's the stain on the shirt? Maybe that's where Harrison lost his lunch in the middle of filming. And I'll tell you what, it'd be worth a shitload more if it was true. So the food in the cafeteria wasn't a much shop, which is absolutely unbelievable. I like this Android juice. You don't want to know. Yes, we do.
It's those stains that you really do want, because they're the ones that allow you to authenticate the actual costume.
Yeah, and especially if it occurred on screen as well. Is that replicant blood on the shirt? Yeah, so if the character spills a liquid on the clothing, and that's actually the liquid from the movie, that's actually very, very cool. Bit of super duper, man, and there's some Wonder Woman stuff in here as well. Look at that. Right in the middle, you got the clapperboard. It's a production used clapperboard from Superman the movie. All right, how good is that? Freaking, they reckon $7,000 for that. I was like, that is just awesome. How cool would that be?
I tell you what, there is a niche market that actually collects clapperboards. So believe it or not, sort of it doesn't seem like much, but there's a small community that will be bidding big time on that one. And because it's from the original movie, that makes it even more special. And the funny thing with clapperboards is it depends on whose clapperboard it is, because sometimes you've got the director's clapperboard. That's the most highly desirable one. You may have the special effects unit, maybe not so much, but then you've got like the third unit director. So if you are going to collect clapperboards, the one with the director's name on it is the one you want.
Well, you can certainly see it's been used from the amount of rubbing off that they've done, and the fact that they kept it. It's just like, that's astounding. So at the top, you've got all the Wonder Woman bits and pieces, right? A few $100 here, a few $100 there. But the killer is the costume in the center, just off to the left of the clapperboard, right? Gal Gadot, this is obviously from the new movies, Diana Prince's Wonder Woman production-made costume, right? And that is going to cost you a ripe $80,000 American if you want that. What do you reckon, Jeffro?
Well, for that price, you'd almost have to guarantee that it was actually used on screen, because they probably made a number of costumes in case something went wrong. So for all we know, it could just be one of those ones that sort of sat on the rack and it was maybe used by the stunt woman. So for that price, I'd really want something that guaranteed it was on the screen.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. They do tend to make a lot of costumes for these movies these days. If you replicate props like I do, the prop auction sites have the world's greatest reference photos. That I'm not surprised by at all. Now, we've seen some really, really cool stuff, and then all of a sudden we're getting Howard the Duck stuff. I reckon that's going to go cheap. The Howard the Duck face appliance. Who would want that, Jeff? I reckon it's...
And the whole world asks that question, and it might be validated because it may be passed in. Because I think from memory, that appliances has been up on auction previously. Don't quote me, but I do know how the duck stuff does not really go well at auction. So it really does live up to the reputation.
Okay, and for the fans who are wondering what this item is, get your minds out of the gutter. It is a one-eyed Willie. Okay, put them back in the gutter. Gold ingot prop. So there you go, and that's going ultra cheap at the moment, only a couple of $100. So yes, the duck is perfect for Halloween parties. Totally agree with you. Scroovy. Yeah, very, very cool. So if you like that sort of stuff, there you go. Now, this one's very, very cool, right? I just recently watched the making of for this, or the behind-the-scenes doco, Life After Flash, and some Flash Gordon stuff. The funny thing is, on the right-hand side, you got a Mongo Citizen costume, right? Now, that's cool, but I don't think it's cool at all because it's some background extra probably, and they're still asking a couple of grand for it there, Mr. Jeffro, as opposed to the middle, which is the Emperor Ming Ming minion costume as well, and some sandals. Go figure that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably because that one is looks like it's a complete costume, whereas the other one is just parts. So there may be some desirability because you've got the whole box and dice rather than just a piece. Because if you've got a piece, and I know one props collector, it really frustrates him because he doesn't have a complete costume of Batman. He's got bits of it. So he's been slowly building it up, but it's like, it's nice to have the complete set.
Yep, no, totally agree with you. If you like a bit of potty head, there's a couple of potty head stuff there. So got the old Harry and the Sorcerer's Stone, the golden snitch prop, and a couple of wands. They must have made millions of wands for this particular show. So some of them are relatively cheap. The Ralph Fiennes one, the Lord Voldemort one, that's $4 grand at the moment. That's the current bid. So that's the one just there. So that's $4,000 at the moment right now. So which makes sense because he was a bad guy. So, but there you go, something to wave your wand at, Mr. Jeffro.
Very good. I mean, there's literally stacks of wands that you could buy in the gift shop, sort of at the Harry Potter experience. So having the real ones, I mean, it might give you a little bit of a tingle, but it just doesn't feel as special.
Tell you what, I definitely like a little bit of a tingle. All right, let's go back in time, shall we, fans? And this is very, very groovy. Now, some of this, you look at it and go, what the hell am I looking at? This is from Forbidden Planet. Along the bottom is actually the actual designs for Robbie the Robot, the actual technical design. So they physically had to build the thing, and of course they did it all on by hand. But then the blueprints, if you will, the actual blueprints for Robbie. And it's like, how groovy is that, Mr. Jeffro?
It is one of those things that because it's on paper, that sort of stuff tends to get preserved a bit more. So it's nice, the fact that it still exists. But you'll find that because it's paper ephemera, it may not attract the interest of the collectors as maybe something like a proper physical prop. But it is very cool. Look really good in the frame.
Speaking of the physical props, way over on the right-hand side, you got, and I have to use the magnifying glass of truth, fans, for those who are wondering, Forbidden Planet. It's the Krell Laboratory Power Gauge panel prop. So if you remember, they had all the panel gauges around the walls, and as the monster bids trying to get through the doors, the power gauges would go up. That's what these things are. So they look really, really small, but in reality, they're probably quite large. It's like, now, if you're wondering what they're worth, they reckon they'll go for about $3 grand because there was a few of them made. But what do you reckon of that, Mr. Jeffro? Get a bit of Krell action in your own house. How good's that?
I mean, if you had to look at that, I mean, how would you really know? I mean, unless you're a diehard. So I don't know how many diehard Forbidden Planet fans are still out there. But, if that floats your boat, then Krell for it.
There you go. Good old Natasha, the little dude, has said that's amazing. And she was talking about the previous item, but that says very, very cool. You can build your own Robbie. Oh, yeah. And it is pretty funny that all these plans and drawings are still around, which is kind of cool. Now, this is probably going to interest virtually very few people. And I know a couple of people watching the show now won't be interested at all. But hey, if you want to join the guild, it's the Guild Navigator costume. That's the first stage Guild Navigator for those technical people out there. Mate, he is going as cheap as chips. Only $3 grand. I mean, it must look like an oversized raincoat with a whole lot of bits stuck on it. But what the hell? It's better than nothing. All you got to do is shove some tubes up your nose and get a bit of spice action happening, and you're ready to fold space, Mr. Jeffro.
That could be one of those ones that could be one of the surprise buys, because I mean that is a very good price for a costume, and we are talking something that's sort of 40 years old, and who knows? I think that one might sort of go way above the estimate.
So earlier, Colin, who was on the show, said he needs to sell some stuff out of his house to try and buy some things. Spankin, I love this. He's got 2 kids for sale, both kind of okay. One is 3, the other was run. Can sell sometimes, make an offer, need the money for props. Absolutely love it. Well, okay, if the Forbidden Planet Krell stuff didn't float your boat, right? Well, ladies and gents, especially ladies, you can get into this. You can get into an Anne Francis costume. The Altera ensemble with photos, and it's got a name in the back. Now, I don't know if this was the only one, and I'm not sure if that's the picture of the one on screen there, but that would be very groovy. What do you reckon there, Mr. Jeffro?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hope it's sort of been well preserved, because I mean, costumes after a period of time probably can sort of get a bit musty and sort of get a little bit of degradation. But yeah, that's pretty awesome. I mean, the name on the back gives it that provenance. So no, I really like this one.
Which is funny, because with Forbidden Planet, a lot of the costumes did get used for other movies, especially the uniforms. So you'd almost be saying, oh, here's a costume, this is one of the soldier guys from Forbidden Planet, and all these other shows that followed, because I can't remember who made it now. Yeah, they just use the same MGM. They just end up using the same costume, just to different shows. So, whereas that one is clearly just for Anne Francis, and that was it. Yeah,
I'll give you some fun facts that with Mad Max, they used all their costumes, so you'll hardly never see a Mad Max costume go up in auction, because they were always continually recycling the costumes right up until Thunderdome. So that's one of the things that collectors are going, why do you do that? Why do you tear them up and recycle them? But they do.
Oh, it's the same money, for crying out loud. I like this one. Yes, it was Cused in Queen of Outer Space with the Jar Jar Gabor as well. Indiana Jones. Now, this one was interesting. Even I saw this. Aaron saw this, right? And Spankin, who's watching right now, has probably got some questions to do with Raise the Lost Ark. It says up here the Ark, right? Raise the Lost Ark, production used Ark of the Covenant prop. But that looks nothing like the Ark of the Covenant, this thing up here. And I don't know what the stories were that, whether it was one that they were going to use and they changed the design. I don't know, but it's got a $25,000 price tag on it with 2 bids. So someone's obviously like going for it. But that one had me scratching my head. It's the same color, but it's completely the wrong shape, and that's given away by the things at the top. So I don't know what the deal is with that. So
yeah, you are right. It's not the actual Ark. And I remember there was a story online. I remember reading it sort of 4 or 5 weeks back. I can't remember what the story is, but it's definitely not the real thing. It's more like a trial one that they did.
Yeah, because they made 2 arcs, right? So one where the lid came off and one where the lid didn't come off. And of course, as we said, like once upon a time at Skywalker Ranch where the arc was kept, the one with the lid that came off, all the visitors were told, don't take the lid off the ark, whatever you do. And of course, people take the lid off the ark, and they had a model of Howard the Duck inside there with the sign saying, I told you not to take the lid off. So, yeah, so and that one's, quite well known. Stunt ark indeed. It's a concept arc that was not approved. Yeah, that would make sense. In the end, these things do take a bit of time, and they go, how about this and how about that? So, but if it is one that they made as a test and didn't use it and have kept it and now it's for sale, I can see why it would have a bit of value associated with it, which is very, very groovy.
Particularly when the original is in, say, the Lucasfilm archives, so no one's ever going to get it. So it's like, well, this is the best next thing.
Yeah, next best thing. Speaking of next best things, I can't get those words out. Lost in Space there, Mr. Jeffro. A whole range of doodads. B9 bits everywhere, Jupiter 2s everywhere. The Jupiter 2 at the bottom, stunt spaceship prop with Gemini 12 launch tower and gantries. 12. Oh, hang on. Its current bid is 40 grand. That's what the 2 people are bidding for that at the moment. At the bottom there. How good is that, Mr. Jeffro?
Yeah, the Lost in the Space stuff, it's all suddenly come out because model maker Greg Jean, who passed away, had a big auction, and a lot of his stuff was sort of vintage stuff from the 60s, including Lost in Space. So there has been a lot of this stuff comes out. And what gets me is in these listings, it says, here is the item, plus we'll throw in a DVD with the episode that actually had that item in it, which I thought was really bizarre.
I was trying to work out what the DVD part was. I was not able to figure it out. So there you go. And at the top, right at the top, in the middle, Lost in Space, Time Tunnel, and City Beneath the Sea control station with photo book and DVD. So they reckon that's going to go for 20 grand, and it's only 3 grand at the moment. So that's this thing up there. So it probably looks a lot bigger than what the photo suggests, which is very, very cool. So regarding the Ark, I like this one from Madsy. He's saying that the real one's in Spankin's garage and will resurface in 2,000 years. Remember, it is history. And of course, you can't have an auction without having some Star Wars stuff chucked in. So pieces of the Death Star at the top from Return of the Jedi. There would have been lots of those. Now, the AT-AT Walker way over here on the left, it does say it's a miniature. And it's a possibility it's like literally that big because they did have background ones as opposed to the big models that they used. That's only going for a couple of grand. This thing here is actually like the head, the test head that they did for the AT-AT Walkers. And you've got all sorts of bits and pieces as well, which is a very, very groovy, including an A-Wing fighter. Yeah, what do you reckon there, Jeffro?
Yeah, with the AT-AT or AT-AT, depending on who you're talking to.
You're talking to me, so it's AT-AT, but yeah.
and I agree with you, yeah. So you'd almost hope that they would sort of put like a little ruler that sort of shows the scale, but maybe it's like, if you use your imagination, you're probably thinking it's bigger than what it is. And I've bought stuff online where it's like, I think, oh, that's going to be awesome. And I get it's like fraction of the size. But it would have been nice if they'd had, say, production photos of Phil Tippett, you know, with his head up through his little trapdoor, you know, operating the little AT-AT. So that would have been pretty cool to supplement it with that.
Spankin', all right. Did I mention I really need to sell my kids? Don't tell Tash, she's already on the line watching. Oh, she just saw this post. And Tash is going, yes, offload. We must buy collectibles now because one thing you must get is some Apley costumes there, Mr. Jeffro. Planet of the Apes. How good is this? Chimpanzee suits. He got the gorilla suit at the top right as well. The soldier ensemble. That is kind of cool. I can't believe, this movie is like 60 years old now. And they've still got stuff for it. I don't know what the condition is like, but what do you reckon? Damn them all to hell there, Jeffro.
Yeah, you'd actually be surprised, but there is a lot of Planet of the Apes suits and costumes that are floating around in collectors. So it doesn't surprise me too much that they turn up because apparently there are a lot of them.
Colin said that the Lost in Space Jupiter 2 was sold for $65,000. Well, with that in mind, we have a couple of big items here. On the right-hand side, the robot model B9 original 1-to-1 stunt model, it's sold. Crikey's, $444,000, which in Australian dollars is around $700,000. The stunt model. Jeffro, mate, how many like Jeffro collectibles would you have to sell to buy one of those?
It is pretty amazing. And the fact that it's complete, what a temptation. Mind you, you'd have to have Peter Jackson type money to afford it. But this is the thing. There are a lot of famous people in Hollywood and all that are really getting into this collecting. It's like art, it's one of a kind. It's art. So someone thought this might be a good investment and purchased it. But yeah, $444,000. It's almost $500,000, isn't it, when you think about it?
Yeah, and of course it's 1-to-1 scale, so it's the full size unit. And in the middle, you got the Guy Williams Professor John Robinson's spacesuit ensemble, so his actual costume, $35,000 for that. That's sold for $35,000, so that's $50,000 Australian. It's like, Jesus Christ, there are definitely some Lost in Space fans out there. Christy asked, which Planet of the Apes movie were they from? I'm assuming the original, but I don't know.
I'd say so.
But yeah, so either way, it's still going to be 60 years old or 55 years old, depending. So because of the first 5 original movies. Spankin is still desperate. He'll chuck in the chickens and the fish. And Tash just whacked him because they are sitting in the same room for some reason. So there you go, which is very, very good. How good is that, though? That is just some really, really spunky stuff. Mate, good to have some money, isn't it? Right there, Jeffro. Especially when you're buying items that are one-offs and they just can't be replicated. Erwin Allen makes an appearance with some of his bits and pieces, Time Tunnel and The Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. Okay. Bits and pieces there, unknown project, original concept art. It's mainly all pictures and things there. Jeffrey, what do you reckon, old son?
Yeah, I mean, it's really digging into the people's collections, because I mean, this is all stuff. As I said, it's concept art. You know, it's unproduced pilots. It's stuff that never technically made it onto the screen, but because it's got the Irwin Allen name, you know, sort of it might get a little bit of money. So it's interesting because a lot of this stuff hasn't probably been seen in reference books and such. So some collectors had it for a long time, and the first time we're actually seeing it is in these catalogs, because, as I said, it's never been published, those pictures before.
Very cool. And Russell, you are right. The Planet of the Apes costumes would have been reused for each different movie. What you needed is like the Roddy McDowall hero costume, or the Kim Hunter costume, or even, I mean, Charlton Heston didn't really wear much, but maybe spacesuit or something that might bring in a few bucks. But yeah, that'd be the way to go. We're back to Star Wars again, and of course the old Mandalorian, good old Din Djarin, his helmet on the bottom left. Forget the 3D printed versions and whatever else. This is apparently the real deal. 2 bids at the moment, 10 grand a pop. How good is that? Along with some posters and caps as well. What do you reckon, Jeffro? If you're into Star Wars, this would be a cup of tea.
It almost makes me wonder that sort of whoever the props guys are sort of say, well, while we've got the molds, let's just make a couple of extra ones, because I just find it very hard that that's actually been let off the set. So I do wonder the story behind that. But that's one of the things that you often get to hear about these things, is that they'd make, you know, like 20 different versions of a hero gun, and, you know, they just make up extras so they can keep them for themselves. So it may not necessarily be something that was ever used or seen on the set, but it's a copy.
Now, what I don't get, you got the Yoda hat up here with the ears, right? And Gavin, who's not watching tonight, is an absolute Yoda fanatic. That is currently got a bid of $350. That's $500 Australian. Why would that, unless it's owned by somebody or is someone's personal possession, or it's a one-off production item or a one-off license item, that's a lot of money for a freaking Yoda hat with the ears. So I don't know what the deal is with
absolutely.
that.
I mean,
yeah.
It has to be something to do with the provenance as to where it's come from, because that mystifies me too.
Yeah, I don't totally get that at all. Sticking with the old Star Wars, remember that poster on the left-hand side? I saw this in the school library back in the early 80s when I was in high school. So $200 for the Reed poster. There's some movie posters there, vintage 1981 re-release. Actually, I had a couple of these, believe it or not. The top right-hand corner. This was a bit of a weird one. The ceremonial rebel guard from A New Hope. They reckon it's going to go for $6,000. It's currently at $1,000. That's a pretty boring jacket, but I suppose if it's a screen used, because they would have made stacks of them for that particular scene in the throne room at the end. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, it is pretty boring, but, you know, it is A New Hope. You know, that's the most desirable movie next to Empire Strikes Back, because, you know, it's the OG original. So, as I said, it may be boring, but it could be within someone's budget to buy that, as opposed to, you know, like a hand vest or something like that. So it's probably something better than nothing. At least you've got something from the original movie.
Wouldn't it be funny if you wore that and you said, "Can I get this Rebel Legion approved?" And they knocked you back and go, "Come on, it's used in the films. It's better than anything else you guys are making." Cheapers creepers. Unbelievable. Which is very, very groovy. Because anybody who knows anything about movie costumes, their quality tends to be pretty terrible. So when you see them in real life, they go, "Oh my God, that's absolutely pox." And everybody knows about the Cylons from Battlestar Galactica being held together with chrome sticky tape, but which is kind of funny. Back to good old Irwin again, the lad. A bit of time tunnel stuff. What's the bottom of the sea gallery edition? Mobius got the FS1 submarine. That's going as cheap as chips, only a few $100. Mr. Jeffro, you could sell a couple of pops and buy that yourself.
I think I'd rather buy Russell Devlin's Seaview than sub than
that. No, it's not the Seaview. It's the yellow thing, the submarine thing.
Yeah, the submarine. Yeah.
Actually, I did see the Seaview for sale recently somewhere. We might have been here, actually. I think it's coming up later on. It's just like, It's the hero. What do you call it? The hero model, which is very very groovy. My high school had Yoda next to Garfield, as one does. So there you go. If Yoda was made out of lasagna, it wouldn't end well for him. What can I say? And this is, I think, is our last image. So yeah, if you didn't have a picture for some reason, but I'm sure the CBU was actually in that auction as well. I sent a picture to Russell. 25
I
grand.
think you might be right. Yeah.
250 or 25 grand, some massive amount of number. It was the hero model. It's like, bloody hell, how good is that? And of course, we've got some posters, which is particularly cool there, Mr. Jeffro, eh? Planet of the Vampires, Angry Red Planet, Reptilicus, Wackadoo. Mate, they're chucking them away.
Wow. I mean, they're excellent sort of because they've got that art style that sort of, just really catches your eye. And this is the thing about posters that were actually done by poster artists as opposed to, done in Photoshop and all that. So, they do make very impressive things to hang on the walls.
Talk about the CVU. So Russell did actually has a CVU model, spectacular, and it did get used in a fast forward commercial skit, right? So it is actually screen used officially. And he said, "His is a fast forward clip. Comes with the Steve Vizard arrest warrant." But it is screen used. It might not be like internationally screen used, but it was used on Australian television. And talking about the sub, it's just a commercial flying sub. But if it was used on the show, that might be something important. You never know. So very good, Mr. Jeffro. So you're going to be like lashing out, forgetting about trips overseas and all this other exciting stuff, paying off the house mortgage. Forget that, mate. Invest in some pops and collectibles. What do you reckon?
It is one of those things. If you're going to invest in props and things like that, now's probably not the time to do it because even the hardcore prop collectors are just saying, I can't afford it. And because as I said, there's a lot of serious money, like people like Peter Jackson, just, keep their hand up saying, I'll bid it up until I get it, and money's no object. And there was also, I think, someone from Apple, one of the, sort of managers of Apple who had a huge collection, and he'd be the same, as soon as they saw that he was actually bidding an option, they just said, we're not going to get anything because he'll just put the price up until he gets it.
See, that's the funny story. So for people watching the show, and then there will be some watching the show who go, who the hell's Jeffro? What's his story? Well, Jeffro, as it was back in the 80s, was the auction king extraordinaire. And you've just said that some of those rich dudes will keep their hands up until they win an item. You were notorious. You had a reputation of being the guy in auctions. And I physically saw this, fans. We're in a cinema. They're doing an auction. And I say, who's that dude down there? This is 1987. They go, that's Jeffro. Don't bid against him. No one, he never loses. And of course, as soon as your hand went up, everybody else's went down because you were just like money to burn. It's like you could not be beaten. So you're actually just talking about yourself a moment ago. I love it.
Wow. What can I say? I was ahead of time because, I mean, I knew this stuff was going to be sort of important years later. So I could see that it was going to have value.
That's cool. Two things. So Collins looked it up. The CVU did go for $222,000, and that was the hero, the large model from the show. So that would have been the really big model. It would have been fantastic. There is definitely, after what you said, there's definitely something to be said about buying props and collectibles from movies from decades ago versus something that's made today. Because you are right regarding the MCU Wonder Woman costume we saw earlier. There would be dozens, if not hundreds, of those costumes for all the different movies, for all the different scenes, blah, 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 blah. And because they've got the money to do that. So in the end, you can say, I have got this wonderful prop from this movie, not realizing there's like 50 others behind it, and they're all identical to the one that you've just bought. And they, at some point, will also go up on auction as well. So there's definitely a trap regarding that, as opposed to older stuff where they would say, look, we only had one or two suits made. That's it. There's no more. And they're equally as valuable. So if you're into props and collectibles, you've got to be very careful of that, especially props like guns and stuff. You can make millions of those things now. So it's a bit, you got to know your stuff and you got to know what you're paying for. And but if you've got items that are one-off, completely, there are no replicas, then you're cooking on gas. Sound advice, Mr. Jeffro?
Oh, absolutely sound advice. Because the thing is that in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even as far as the 90s, they never considered the stuff valuable. So they often turfed it or trashed it, whatever it is. But of course, they're very aware these days, so they do keep everything. So yeah.
So, as we said, Rusky Babes has the Seaview submarine. Spankin has said he'll swap his kids for it, right? Desperate times for desperate measures. All right, normally, we're sort of changing the program a little bit, right? Normally, if the lad was here, we're about to get into this sequence. But guess what? The lad's not here, and we're still going to get into this sequence because I want to just chuck a question towards Jeffro, because now it's time for this.
A question.
Now, Jeffro has got no idea what I'm going to ask him, and it's kind of funny because this is right up his alley, and I'm going to try and articulate this the best that I can, right? So this is the question that I'm going to ask. Could Lost in Space have had the same success as Star Trek if the show was revived in the 70s or the 80s? And the reason why I'm asking that question is because when Lost in Space and Star Trek were going head-to-head in the 60s, Lost in Space actually had better ratings. Now, granted, the story is a little bit more difficult to work with, but if apples for apples, when Star Trek got kind of revived as movies in the 70s and a brand new series in the 80s, if the similar thing could have occurred with Lost in Space, do you reckon they would have been on a par with each other regarding success?
Oh, very good question. I mean, I know that they did try and spin off Lost in Space as a new pilot, and it's on YouTube somewhere, I think in the 90s. And of course, it didn't go any further. And of course, there was also a cartoon that was also done.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, with Lost in Space, it went into syndication, and it was like repeated as nauseum. I mean, any kid that was in Australia that grew up sort of will remember Channel 10 used to show them, all the time. And I think with Star Trek, because it didn't really get as much repeat viewing as it should have done, whereas Lost in Space did, there was no real need for us to be able to get a remake of Lost in Space, because we were still enjoying the original one. So it would have been good to have seen something, because it may well have rebooted the Irwin Allen fan base, because we just, we don't have as many. I'm an Irwin Allen fan, so we just don't have as many fans as, of course, Star Trek. But it would have been interesting if they had tried it, but the original one set such a high bar, it would be hard to imagine it would be as successful as, say, Next Generation.
Okay, I like this one from Colin. A cartoon. Oh, the pain. That's actually very good. Now, I know that what helped with Star Trek, of course, was all the huge fan write-ins and the big fan phenomenon in the 70s, where they really pushed it and they tried to get new series made. And that kind of probably helped push it along its way. I do wonder, though, because A Lost in Space outranked Star Trek in the 60s, if it was somehow revived, and as you said, they did do a cartoon series, if they made a movie out of it, or did a Lost in Space Next Generation, I don't know what that would even look like in the 80s. I do wonder if they would have run neck and neck with Star Trek, whether Lost in Space would have ended up winning as it did originally. So, or whether it was ever destined to say it had its time in the sun and that was it. And I know since then, of course, you had the movie released in 90 whatever, and the new series that was released on Netflix a few years ago, which I thought was outstanding. It's never really achieved the same heights that Star Trek once had. And I don't know if that's to do with the fan base that existed in the late 60s, early 70s that Star Trek clearly had. So any thoughts on that?
The thing that occurred to me is essentially Lost in Space is remaking the same story over and over again, because it doesn't really have anywhere it can go. They go out in space, they get lost, they crash land on a planet, that's it. Whereas with Star Trek, you've got whole universes to explore, different sort of storylines, a whole bunch of options there. Whereas Lost in Space, you really are limited. I mean, if you ever watched the original series, it was just like the monster or alien of the week that would visit. So it is a little bit of a harder one to try and sort of successfully reboot, although the recent one did that. But I guess they only had, 10 episodes in a season, so it didn't make it too bad for them.
Yep, no, I think that's completely understandable too. The later official revivals also failed, maybe because they took themselves so seriously. The Netflix version was actually really good. I really dialed into it. I thought it was excellent. But and I agree with you. Yeah, the story was always going to be limited. How do you make it longer? I don't know. The family can't have families within themselves. That's interbreeding. You can't do that. So yeah, I guess they were kind of locked. But for those who didn't know, those Lost in Space did actually outrank Star Trek in the '60s when they were first on. So. And you need another Jonathan Harris. Yes, trying to find a replacement for that would be very difficult. The Dr. Smith from the new series, she was excellent because she was just a complete psycho. And that's the reason why I thought it always worked. Guess what? Normally, now at the start of the show, we said we're going to do the talk about the auction thing, and then we're going to have like questions without warning, and then talk about Handmaid's Tale. But because Jeffro's just joined us, and has never seen Handmaid's Tale, we're not going to discuss that this week. I'll carry it over for next week. We've still got a few minutes to go, actually. So we can just sort of like gurgle on about stuff. So we almost chatted on for an hour. Lost in Space's success was due to several factors which are unlikely to be repeated. That's a fair call. And have you always loved Land of the Giants? I think anybody who's an Irwin Allen fan would say yes to that. A lot of his stuff was just groundbreaking, revolutionary at the time. What do you reckon, Jeffro?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. When you sort of saw the level of detail to props and things like that, it was brilliant. And again, sort of Channel 9 used to show repeats of Land of the Giants and all that, and Time Tunnel that you always had it there to watch. And then of course later on they released them on the DVD. I think from memory they did try and remake Time Tunnel. Again, vague recollections of seeing something on YouTube. So if you are interested, just type in Time Tunnel unaired pilot and just see what you get.
Very cool. Christy said,
but not now.
Yeah, not now because you're with us. Either you have a show where they are terrible pilots or the other where they can't backtrack. There's a whole... If you could look in the archives of Hollywood, there would be thousands of pilots for TV shows that never went into production. And I'm sure some of them were probably pretty good. You know, that just someone somewhere said, nah, too expensive, too hard, too difficult, too this. There could be all sorts of sci-fi shows that just never went anywhere. And of course, we'll never know what they are. Unless the people who made those shows said, yeah, I made this pilot, it never took off, and that was the end of that. So, which was kind of sad. Jonathan Harris is essential Lost in Space as Paul Dara in Blake 7. Yeah, that's a fair call. I mean, it's funnily enough, his character actually turned me off the show. I couldn't stand him, so I actually refused to watch Lost in Space. So it had the adverse effect for myself. But I understand the character was amazingly popular. And of course, I think it was because of him and Will Robinson, because they became so popular, the rest of the cast got a bit shirty at the time. That's correct, isn't it, Jeffro?
Yeah, that is absolutely right in terms of the fan mail and all that. So it's almost the way, like with Star Trek, sort of Leonard Nimoy sort of got all the attention, and poor old William Shatner and everyone else sort of couldn't quite accept it.
True. Time tunnelers, time travelers. Yeah,
that's the one.
Anything to do with time travel, even like Quantum Leap to a degree, you can kind of see they've got the genesis in that particular series, which is very, very groovy. We've got 3 minutes to go before we're due to officially sign off. If anybody wants to ask Jeffro a question, now start typing. Okay, there's a 10-second delay between us and when we get these messages.
What is the answer to life and universe and everything? That's
it's 43, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, jeepers creepers.
It's 42 plus inflation. 42 plus GST.
Exactly right. What do they call it? It's the cost of living pressures that we're all under at the moment. The price has gone up. So there you go. Who the hell's this? Jeffrey? Hi, Jeffrey. Is it me or is it? You obviously typed this out really quickly, and what do you call it? The auto fillers fill in the gaps. Is it me, or did the remake of the Twilight Zone fail? Well, it depends on how you define fail. I mean, whether the stories worked. I mean, there's been 5 versions of the Twilight Zone. That doesn't include the movie. So some people would have liked them. But Twilight Zone is a story that can only go for a certain amount of time. Sorry, dude, go for it.
I didn't think they failed. I mean, I thought they were fairly unique. I didn't think all that much of the recent one, though.
Tash is hitting me, so I stuffed it up. I'm sorry, sir. I stuffed it up. Very good. Hang on. You are right. Yeah. Hang on. Sliders, Quantum Leap. Yeah, I didn't think of sliders, but yeah, that's yeah. I mean, anything to do with time travel, you can say, well, it has its genesis in the time tunnel, even if they're not related at all. What's the best collectible you own? Keep the answer short if you can.
Oh, I think the best collectible I would own would probably be my Space 99 costume, which is a prop that I bought in the 80s.
Very good. Spankin saying he's still selling the kids. I love it, which is absolutely fantastic. Well, anyway, look, it's 9 o'clock. We've got 1 hour. We've finished our hour. A part of me really wants to keep going, but also, it's sort of it's meant to only been our show. We will talk about The Handmaid's Tale next week. It is a bit of a serious topic to talk about. It's not exactly a fun show, but it is set in a dystopian future, and it's very thought-provoking. I mean, if anything, for those who have no idea what I'm talking about, you've watched Docky Who, you've watched The Acolyte, and if you want to watch The Handmaid's Tale, you go, mate, The Handmaid's Tale just blows the other two out of the water in terms of writing, casting, production design, just good quality. So it needs a bit of time to spend on it, so we can't just rush through it.
And they've got no excuse. They've got a whole week to catch up and watch it before you start to talk about it.
Yeah, 5 seasons of it. I tell you what, though, it is not for kids, and it is
really 5 seasons.
Yes, 5 seasons.
Oh my God,
and
5
it's
seasons.
Depressing as hell. Yeah, mate. I'll tell you what, it's hard. Yakka definitely rated MA in a lot of instances. There we go. Thanks for the laughs tonight, guys. Hope to see Jeffro again. He's only here because Aaron's crook. So if there's a vote now. We might just kick Aaron off permanently and just keep Jeffro on. So there you go. And Twilight Zone was made multiple times and never quite matched the originals. Totally agree with you. Lightning in a bottle thing. Yes, exactly right, which is completely true. With that in mind, we're going to bugger off now. The end credits don't have Jeffro's name on them because he only just joined with 10 minutes to spare. But any final words before we buzz off for the night, Mr. Jeffro?
Yeah, vote for Aaron because I don't want to do all the work that he does. I just want to just cruise in and just talk. So
Indeed.
vote for Aaron.
Vote for Aaron. Vote 1 for Aaron. Awesome. Good stuff. Hopefully the lad gets better and we'll be back next week. In the meantime, guys, party hard, rock on, and we will see you all next time. So take care. Have a good night.